welcome back to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Today is Thursday, May 22nd. We're almost there. We're almost to the end of the week. Got a good show for you today. First, we're going to go over some programs that I think could break through their respective ceilings. I'm going to talk about a potential college football playoff contender in Oregon. Could they break through and get to that next level? We're also going to talk on, has the Big Ten officially overtaken the SEC? It's a big debate. It can go either way, honestly. We're going to dive into kind of breaking that down, why each side has a legitimate reason. We're also going to talk a little bit about some of the can't-miss, must-see matchups of the 2025 season, some rivalry games, some out-of-conference games, a good mixture, but we're going to talk about that as well. And then make sure you stick around for the end of the show. We're going to finish off my SEC rankings. We got the top 3 teams today. We made it to the end. So stick around for that last segment when we're going to rank and unveil those final 3 teams. But before I get into anything else, I want to remind everybody, this show is all about you. We love hearing your comments, your questions, your opinions, your insights, your hot takes, whatever you got. We want to hear it. We want to make this show as interactive, as exciting as possible. Now, if you're on YouTube, one easy way to do that is to use the Super Chat feature. To use the Super Chat feature, all you have to do is click the $ at the bottom of the chat box, type in your message there, send that in. This guarantees that your message gets on the air, gets read live. It's also just a great way to support our channel, support what we're trying to build here at GSMC. And if Super Chat's not your thing, if you're not on YouTube, you can also go to gsmcpodcast.net to tip, donate, leave a comment or question there. Again, that is gsmcpodcast.net. We are so grateful for all of your support, and we're so happy to have you here as a part of our community at the GSMC Podcast Network. Now, let's talk about some programs that I think have some breakthrough potential. I want to start with Oregon. Now, Oregon, yes, obviously kind of broke through last year, undefeated regular season, Big Ten champions in their first year in the Big Ten, number 1 overall seed in the college football playoff, but they lose their first game. They got the first round bye. They end up losing to Ohio State, the eventual national champion. Is this going to be the year that they can finally break through, exercise that demon, get a national championship? I think it's very possible. This is a super deep Oregon team, and a team that has talent across the board. Starting at quarterback, yes, quarterback is going to be the big question mark here, the big kind of what's going to happen. It sounds like it's going to be Dante Moore. Austin Novosad, he's still kind of in contention right now. Not a bad option himself, but this seems like it's Dante Moore's team. This seems like it's his time. Former 5-star quarterback, guy that started 5 or 6 games for UCLA in 2023 as a true freshman, then transferred to Oregon last year, sat the entire year behind one of the most experienced college football starters ever in Dylan Gabriel, sat behind Dylan Gabriel, learned how to be a quarterback, how to prepare, how to be a successful, big-time, big-program quarterback, and a guy that has the talent, has the pedigree to back it up. It's going to be really interesting to see. They have some continuity there with their offensive coordinator, and will Dante Moore kind of be able to step into that role, step into that system, and perform up to expectations? I think that's going to be one of the big hallmarks of what's going to happen with Oregon with that kind of entire season. But not looking at quarterback, looking across this roster. This is a deep Ducks team. You lose Jordan James, your leading rusher. How do you replace him? You bring in a guy in Mekhi Hughes from Tulane, who has had 2,800 rushing yards in the past 2 seasons and also caught 19 passes last year. So a guy that's going to take over as your lead bell cow running back, a guy that's been super impressive on one of the best group of 5 programs in Tulane. I think he's going to step in right away and take over that number 1 running back role, be a guy that Oregon can lean on in the running game. You also still have Noah Whittington there too, a guy that's super experienced, been in college for about 5 years now. he's going to get plenty of snaps, plenty of reps. Had 540 rushing yards last year. Going to be that kind of change of pace back. But that 1-2 punch of Mekhi Hughes, Noah Whittington is a dangerous combination in the backfield. Wide receivers, yes, you lose Tez Johnson, you lose Terrence Ferguson, you lose Trayshawn Holder, but you still have Evan Stewart. He's going to be that wide receiver 1. You have Jeremiah McClellan, Malik Benson, kind of in competition to be that Z wideout. And, oh yeah, you got the number 1 receiver in the country this year coming in, Dante Moore, a guy that could earn a starting role right away, could potentially have that kind of impact that we saw from freshman wide receivers Jeremiah Smith, Ryan Williams last year at Ohio State and Alabama respectively. So that's another really big, intriguing option is, will this kid get reps as a starter right away? Will he kind of work his way into that role? But Dante Moore should not be overlooked here at all. Offensive line is kind of going to be a toss-up. They brought in a couple transfers, but again, still deep. And then on defense, you have Barrett Alexander at nose tackle, a guy that's kind of bounced around a couple programs. And then Mateo Uagalele, that's going to be your main edge rusher, your guy that's going to get after the passer. 10 sacks last year, really big breakout 2024. He's kind of expected to have an even bigger 2025 season. So Mateo Uagalele, that's going to be a guy that I think is going to have a really, really great season for the Ducks. You still have Bryce Bocher coming back after he got granted another year of eligibility. That's a guy that played in all 14 games for Oregon last year, 13 starts at inside linebacker, won the Burlsworth Trophy last season as the nation's most outstanding player who started as a walk-on. So he's got that grit, that chip on the shoulder that all walk-ons pretty much have. Blake Purchase, another guy that's going to be in there. Devin Jackson stepping up, progressing through the depth chart there. Then you have Dylan Thieneman in the secondary. The other corner's kind of up for grabs right now, but Brandon Johnson leaving at safety, that's going to leave a hole for sure. But you have Dalen Austin, you have Jaden Kennedy coming in that are capable replacements. And you also have another 5-star in Trey McNutt, safety DB kind of. That's a kid that could also potentially earn early playing time for Oregon. And this is a manageable schedule. You only have to go to Penn State in terms of big-time road games. Iowa, you also have to travel to. Iowa's a tough place to play. There's no debate about that. But then you get Indiana at home. You avoid Ohio State. You avoid Michigan. This is a very winnable schedule for Oregon, and they should kind of progress through here. I think they have the team, they have the talent, they have the coaching staff to potentially compete for a national championship. I think a lot of it rests on Dante Moore's shoulders as the quarterback. How's he going to perform? Will he kind of step up to the plate there? That's going to be a big question mark here for Oregon. But all the pieces are in place. It's just time to take that last final step. Another team that I think all the pieces are kind of in place right now, Louisville. Now, Louisville, they're probably shooting for a little lower expectations here, but they are very much a player for the ACC championship. Look at what they've done under Jeff Brom the past 2 seasons, 19-8 in 2 years, and they've been really, really close. They have to avoid kind of the clunker loss, though. Last year, they lost to 3-9 Stanford. 2 years ago, lost to 3-9 Pitt. But returning production's good. They had a solid portal, and it's their time now. You have another transfer quarterback coming in. Jeff Brom going to try to go 3 for 3, bringing in Miller Moss. I think he's a guy that's more talented than the past 2 quarterbacks that he's had in Jack Plummer and Tyler Shuck. And Jeff Brom, kind of a quarterback whisperer, honestly. If you look at his track record, look at what he's done as a coach, this is a guy that knows how to get the best out of his quarterbacks. Miller Moss is going to be really intriguing there after he kind of had a up and down 2024 season, got replaced as USC's starter. He's going to take over, and there's a lot of potential there. Then you look at some of the other pieces for Louisville. Their running back duo. Man, this is a duo here. Isaac Brown, Duke Watson, both true sophomores. Isaac Brown last year, 1,170 rushing yards, 7 yards per carry, 11 touchdowns with a long of 77, also had 30 catches. Duke Watson, 597 yards on 67 carries. That's an 8.9 yards per carry average. A guy that also had 7 touchdowns, also had a long of 68 on the season. So both of those guys, home run hitters, dynamic rushers. It's one of the best backfields in the country, I think. They're both still young. They're both still growing. And while Isaac Brown's the 1,000-yard rusher, that argument could be made that Duke Watson is more explosive, more dynamic of those two options. You add in Keywan Brown as your third option there, and that is a scary, scary running back room for Louisville. A room they can lean on when the passing game's not really going great. Wide receiver-wise, you have Chris Bell. You have Colin Lacey coming back. Antonio Meeks coming in, had a great spring. Dakari Collins coming in from North Carolina State, a really solid addition. So that passing group is still really great. There's a couple really solid options there. Colin Lacey is going to be really interesting too. Kind of showed what he can do in the Sun Bowl, where he had almost 100 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown in that bowl game. That's a guy that could be in line for a big breakout 2025 season. O-line kind of an overhaul, but I think they're going to figure that out. Then on defense, you look at this is a really great defense. They held its own last year. They should hold its own again. You do lose Ashton Gillette to the draft, but you bring in Cleve Lubin Jr. from Coastal Carolina. That's a guy that had 9.5 sacks last year. You have a guy in Adonijah Green who's just teeming with NFL-level potential. You also have a couple guys at defensive tackle that they brought in who could solidify that spot on the D-line. Then you bring back TJ Quinn, your leading tackler over the past 2 seasons. That's a big deal. He's going to have to improve in coverage, but just having that veteran presence, that guy that's in the locker room there, it's going to help. And then Stan Clark, too. If you probably ask a Louisville fan, they'd say this guy is the most likely to be a star, a linebacker that could really, really grow into a big-time role for 2025. Secondary's got question marks, that's for sure. And that's going to be the big thing here. Last year, Louisville was 7-0 when allowing quarterbacks to complete less than 65% of their passes. And they were 2-4 when they allowed quarterbacks to complete more than 65% of their passes. Isn't great. They're going to have to tighten up that pass defense, but that's going to be the big key here. But all the pieces are in place. This could be a team that really makes a jump under Jeff Brom in year 3. Another team I'm looking at, Texas Tech. Now, Texas Tech, they're going to be really interesting. This is a team that had 8 wins last year, completely hit the portal hard, bringing in a ton of guys that were all conference, all honorable mention, just different types of caliber players, guys that could really step in and help them. You think of David Bailey coming in from Stanford in the spring portal. That's a guy on the defensive end who has all-American potential. He's that good. He's going to step in right away, be one of those impact edge rushers. You still have Baron Morton at quarterback. You're going to have to replace Taj Brooks. That's going to be a big question mark, is how do you replace him? He's probably the greatest running back in Texas Tech history. It's going to be almost impossible to fully replace his production, what he brought to the table for the Red Raiders, but they're going to have to find a way to do it. They're going to need to be able to run the ball in the Big 12. You got a couple different guys that all could potentially take over as that lead back, but that's going to be a big question mark. Then you have to dominate the line of scrimmage this year. O-line really had problems protecting the quarterback last year, and the Big 12, they're filled right now with NFL-level D linemen, linebackers, guys that are going to get after the quarterback. They're going to have to step up. They're going to have to protect Baron Morton this year. Then defensively, you're going to have to limit the big plays. That's going to be a big thing to work on. This has kind of been an issue, honestly, since Mike Leach left Texas Tech. It's been an issue for a while. There's a bunch of DBs that they brought in through the portal. Those guys have to step up this year. You have to put pressure on the quarterback as well. We talked about that O-line keeping Baron Morton upright. They got to do that on the other side of the ball. They have to put pressure on the quarterback. their leading person with the most sacks last year, I don't want to say sacker, the person with the most sacks last year only had 5 sacks in Jacob Rodriguez last year. Nobody really kind of came close to making that type of impact besides him. That's going to be a huge thing to work on. But when you look at the pieces in place, when you look at what they brought in, what Joey McGuire is trying to build, this is a team that should be contending for the Big 12. They certainly have the potential to break through and win the Big 12 championship. The question is, will all those transfers mesh together? Will that come and add to a successful season for the Texas Tech Red Raiders? We're going to have to watch and find out. So right now, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about Big Ten, SEC, everybody's favorite debate. But we're going to dive into all of that when we come back on the GSMC College Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network on this Thursday, May 22nd. Just touched on some programs that I think have some breakthrough potential for this upcoming year. Gonna switch gears a little bit, but before I get into anything else, I want to remind everybody that this show is all about you. We love hearing your comments, your questions, your insights, your opinions, whatever you got, we want to hear it. We want to make this show as interactive, as fun, as exciting as possible. One easy way to do that, if you're on YouTube, you can use the Super Chat feature. To use the Super Chat feature, all you have to do is click the $ at the bottom of the chat box, type in your message there, send that in. This guarantees that your message gets on the air, gets read live. It's also just a great way to support our channel, support what we're trying to build here at the GSMC Podcast Network. We're so grateful to have you all here as a part of our community. We couldn't do what we do without your ongoing support here at GSMC. Now, I was going to talk a little bit about Big Ten SEC, might still talk about that, but first, I have some breaking news. So, it sounds like, from the time I went on the air, according to Heather Dinich of ESPN, everybody, the officials around college football, around the college football playoff format, have officially approved the playoff format changing. It's not going to be auto buys anymore for conference champions. They're going to move to a straight seeding model. The top 4 teams ranked in the country will earn those buys. This is a move that I think makes a ton of sense. It's something I had kind of been campaigning for. When you look at kind of what happened last year with the buys, with all of that, how that shook out, it just didn't really make sense to continue rewarding conference champions by giving them a bye. Yes, they completely earn a bid. I'm not disagreeing with that. Conference champions, if you're a Power 4 conference champion, if you're that Group of 5 conference champion, you deserve to be in the college football playoff. There's no question about that. But when you have a scenario like last year, where Boise State earns a bye, Arizona State earns a bye. Arizona State was the number 12 team in the country, yet they were earned a bye because of winning the Big 12. I don't really think that makes a lot of sense, and we kind of saw it really hurt teams such as Oregon last year. Oregon was the number 1 seed in the country. number one team, undefeated throughout the regular season, wins the Big Ten championship, and what's the reward? They have to play Ohio State, who was probably the fourth or fifth best team in the country. I think they were ranked 5 at the time. But again, you have to play Ohio State as opposed to playing, the 9 or 10 seed, something like that. You have to play the team that goes on to win the national championship. That's not really fair for the number one seed, I think. I mean, when you're looking at it, that's your reward for going undefeated, winning the regular season, winning your championship. You have to play probably one of the best teams in the country in your first college football playoff matchup. Doesn't really make a lot of sense. Yes, this is a tournament for the elite, right? This is top 12 in the country, probably going to move to 16 soon. But top 12 in the country, it's for the elite. I don't know. It just doesn't make sense, though, that if you're the number one team in the country, your reward is having to play one of the other top teams in the country when there's lower caliber opponents still available to schedule against. I really like this. I think straight seeding makes the most sense. Again, conference champions, they deserve to be in. Arizona State certainly deserved to be in last year. If you look at Boise State, deserved to be in last year. They ran through the regular season, both of those squads. They end up winning their conferences. They were the highest ranked champions. The Boise State, they were the highest ranked group of 5 champion. They deserve to be in the college football playoff. They deserve to have a spot at the table. However, that doesn't mean that they should automatically get a bid or a bye, right? I don't think that's fair when you think about it. Arizona State was certainly not a top 4 team in the country last year. Same thing with Boise State. They certainly were not a top 4 team in the country last year. So you're kind of penalizing some schools that were better than them, that had better chances to win national championships. You're penalizing those programs and giving some other programs in Arizona State, Boise State, those kind of caliber programs, you're giving them a better opportunity to win. It just doesn't really make a lot of sense. The regular season should count for something, I think, and that's one of the big things here. But I just wanted to share that news. That's my little tangent on that. We're going to continue on with my Big Ten SEC kind of debate. And this was sparked recently by Urban Meyer. So Urban Meyer was at the game at the Rose Bowl, far enough away from the Ohio State sideline to not be a distraction. As the final seconds ticked off the clock in Pasadena, he witnesses Big Ten football at its finest in the college football playoff era. Loaded number 8 seed Ohio State, they dismantled a previously unbeaten conference champion in Texas. And this is kind of how it's gone. There hasn't been a more complete masterpiece in the weeks that followed then after the Rose Bowl. Ohio State beats Oregon by 3 touchdowns. Then they take down Texas. And then they carry that momentum into the national championship, beat Notre Dame, win something for the Big Ten. And Notre Dame, mind you, they knocked out Georgia in the semifinal. They knock out an SEC team, so there's no SEC teams in the national championship for the second year in a row. For good measure, Ohio State also kind of kicked off that college football playoff run by dismantling Tennessee at home, an SEC opponent. The Big Ten's 2024 college football playoff run, I think, was a peak moment of a process that began a couple years ago when Nick Saban and Alabama were stopped by Michigan at the goal line at the Rose Bowl, kind of ending the SEC's multi-year reign at the top of college football, at the top of that hierarchy. Saban steps away then, and since then, the SEC has no more title trophies. Urban Meyer kind of said, what the SEC's done? It's raised the level. But the Big Ten has passed the SEC on the upper part. If you would have told me that 10 years ago, I would have said it's not even close, because it's not. This is something that's kind of been debated, and other people have said something similar. If you go into the 2025 season looking at preseason win totals, the Big Ten, they have 3 teams that their win totals are set at 10.5. Meanwhile, the SEC has no teams projected to win double-digit games. That's according to FanDuel Sportsbook right now. Urban Meyer also, this is a guy that coached at Florida in the SEC obviously coached at Ohio State then in the Big Ten. And he said the narrative kind of began to change when Big Ten really started going after top-end players in recruiting. When they first got to the Big Ten, even his wife said that this is slow football. That's just kind of how it was. But Ohio State kind of changed that under Urban Meyer, introducing a more spread-out offense, more fast-paced, kind of getting with the times of college football. And then they really started investing in blue-chip prospects. Kind of everybody else follows suit. You start seeing Michigan go after 5 stars, Penn State go after 5 stars, that kind of thing. As a result, you look at the Michigan team 2 years ago. That was probably one of the best football teams we've ever seen throughout college football. Ohio State, this past year, again, probably one of the best rosters top to bottom we've seen throughout college football. Penn State, some of these other programs, all having great success. And you look at just some of the guys that Jeremiah Smith, Drew Aller. Drew Aller could be the number 1 overall pick in next year's draft, which, if he was, that's highly speculative. But if Drew Aller is the number 1 overall draft pick in 2026, he would be the first Big Ten player to do so since Jeff George in 1990. 1990, 35 years since the Big Ten has had a number 1 overall pick, is pretty crazy. Then you also look at TV revenue, TV contracts. The Big Ten, they're almost over $1 billion in revenue. They have led college football, that landscape, in the past couple of seasons after signing that big-time deal with ESPN a few years ago. And there's 5 programs right now that have legit playoff hopes. But the SEC, they're still there. They're still hanging around. This is a league that's won 15 national titles in the 27 years since BCS was introduced in 1998. Hasn't been all one school. Obviously, Alabama has won a bunch of times under Nick Saban, but 6 different SEC schools have hoisted the national championship trophy in the past quarter century. Now, the Big Ten has won 2 in a row with 2 different programs. They also got 4 teams into the 12-team college football playoff last year, and 3 of them made it to the quarterfinals, while 2 made the semifinals. SEC, they only got 3 teams in last year. Texas was the only one of those to win a game. And they almost got knocked out, too, by Arizona State in that crazy overtime game. Georgia, Tennessee, both one-and-dones. They won, they got in the playoff, and then they lose right away. Unceremoniously kind of dumped out by the 2 teams that end up in the national championship. You look at the Big Ten, head-to-head, went 2-0 against the SEC in the college football playoff. They also went 3-1 against it in other bowl games. So it kind of seems like the Big Ten has overtaken that spot. However, there's a difference here, I think, in the Big Ten. They're kind of have the same argument now that SEC fans or non-SEC fans always used to make against the SEC. The Big Ten is very top-heavy. They may have 4 top 10 teams, but then it only has 4 more in the top 40 in the country. If you make matters worse, the Big Ten also has 3 teams ranked in the bottom 40 of the country right now in Maryland, Northwestern, and Purdue. SEC only has 2 in Kentucky and Mississippi State right now. So essentially what we can take away is, yes, the Big Ten has won 2 national championships with 2 different schools in the past couple of years, but it's a very top-heavy league. It's a league where there's a clear separation between the top 4 or 5 programs and then pretty much everybody else. SEC, they might not have the best team in the country every year like they used to, but it's got a larger selection of really, really good football teams. You look at Texas, yes, I think they're up there right now. Georgia, obviously. Alabama is a really good football team. South Carolina, LSU, Ole Miss even, Tennessee, all these kind of middle-tier programs, but all of them could at any point be in the college football playoff conversation. Texas A&M, kind of on a similar path. So I think once you get past the Big Ten's kind of 5 teams, the SEC starts to look stronger top to bottom. So, I don't know. This is going to be a debate that goes on forever. I probably right now would lean towards more of the Big Ten having supremacy at this point in the college football landscape. However, this is something that could change in an instant. The SEC still producing really strong teams, really strong players, and they certainly could get back up to that top tier. I just think, based on the past couple of years, kind of the way everything's been trending, the Big Ten is on fire right now. I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to see it, especially with Penn State, Oregon, Ohio State, all being really strong teams this year. It's going to be interesting. But right now, we're going to take another short break on the show. When we come back, we're going to switch gears. We're going to talk about some of the best matchups for this upcoming year, some games that I'm really excited about. But we're going to dive into all of that when we come back on the GSMC College Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network on this Thursday, May 22nd. Excuse me, had a little tickle in my throat there, but just talked a little bit about Big Ten, SEC, who's on top, kind of up for debate right now. I'm leaning Big Ten, but SEC certainly has an argument here. Gonna switch gears. We're gonna talk a little bit about some matchups that I think you're gonna have to watch this upcoming year. I want to start by going towards the end of the season. Who doesn't love some good old, clean, old-fashioned hate in Georgia Tech, Georgia? This is going to be an awesome game. Last year, you remember this matchup, really, really entertaining. 8 overtimes. Georgia eventually fends off Georgia Tech, who was incredibly feisty, a team that really should have won that game. But this is going to be a good one. Georgia's won 7 straight meetings against their in-state rival, but the Yellow Jackets, they've been kind of closing the gap, especially under head coach Brent Key during his tenure. They've slowly built that program up to where Georgia Tech is again respectable. They're no longer a walkover. I'm sorry, one second. Oh man, that's much better. Had to clear my throat for a second. Sorry about that, everybody, but it's allergy season. You know how it goes. So back to Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech, they've been closing the gap. During Brent Key's tenure, they keep inching closer and closer, and I think last year's Georgia game really showcased that. They came out, they played with a ton of confidence. They were not scared of the moment whatsoever. And this was in Athens. It was a road game for Georgia Tech, a night game, a primetime matchup in which Georgia Tech really showed up. They showed that they were there to play. They weren't there to mess around. Yes, they did end up losing in the end. However, the fight, the drive, the competitive spirit that they showed in that matchup means that I think they're going to really, really, really want this one this year in that clean, old-fashioned hate game, in that matchup. It's going to be interesting. I think Georgia Tech is really itching for a win, for a get-back at Georgia. They don't want to be the little brother anymore. They want to showcase what they can do. Haynes King is back at quarterback. You have a couple other guys. You still have your running back there. It's going to be interesting. You do lose Eric Singleton Jr., which that's a big factor at wide receiver, going to Auburn now. But Georgia Tech's still got a lot of players. Their confidence is at sky high right now, I think. And if they're able to kind of carry that mindset over from that Georgia game last year into this upcoming season, this is a Georgia Tech team that could scare a lot of opponents, and I'm really excited to see how they come out. Do they kind of have that fire in the last week of the season, in rivalry week? Will they be able to finally get past the Bulldogs and get back to kind of where they were at one point? It's going to be a great matchup. I think it's going to be really intriguing. Another matchup with one SEC team in it is Texas A&M at Notre Dame. This is going to happen September 13th, so a couple weeks into the season. It's going to be an interesting one. Mike Elko and the Aggies, they're going to have vengeance on the brain. They're going to come in, look at Touchdown Jesus, and say, hey, I want to go home with this win. We'll see if Notre Dame can do that. We'll let them do that, though. Notre Dame, obviously, this was a matchup that opened the season last year at Kyle Field. Notre Dame really winning a really tight battle between them and the Aggies. Texas A&M is going to want their get back this year. Notre Dame kind of used that victory, too, last year in the season opener as a foundation to kind of say, hey, we can actually do this. We can compete with SEC programs. We can go into one of the biggest stadiums in the country in Kyle Field in a primetime matchup and win in those kind of places. They kind of use that as the launching point for their eventual run to the national championship. This time, though, it's going to be a little different. They're going to be without Riley Leonard at quarterback. It's probably going to be C.J. Carr, Kenny Minchney, still in competition there. And Texas A&M, they kind of had some really intriguing portal pickups. Wide receivers especially, bringing in Casey Concepcion from North Carolina State, as well as Mario Craver from Mississippi State. I think Mario Craver is a guy that's kind of getting overlooked right now. Kind of got lost in the shuffle of a really bad Mississippi State team. But that's a guy that's got a ton of talent at wide receiver. Texas A&M is going to want this game back. They lost at home last year. They got embarrassed in the season opener, and that kind of derailed their season. Yes, they still were ranked throughout the season, but starting 0-1 just isn't a great look, especially in the SEC. Texas A&M, they're going to want to win this game in South Bend. I don't know if Notre Dame's going to let them. I think it's going to be a really intriguing matchup. It's going to be a hard-nosed battle. I think it's probably going to be similar to last year's game where it was kind of low scoring, but it was tight throughout the entire game. It's going to be a good matchup. It's going to be one to watch. But Texas A&M, they're going to try to come back and get that win in South Bend, Indiana. Another kind of intriguing matchup on the flip side is Michigan at Oklahoma. Now, this is going to happen September 6th, right? So right at the start of the season, pretty much. And it's intriguing for a couple of different reasons. Oklahoma really struggled last year in SEC play, have struggled under head coach Brent Venables for the past few seasons. Michigan had that really weird season last year. They were pretty much 500 and then beat Ohio State in Columbus. And then the last time we saw them play an SEC opponent, it was in the ReliaQuest Bowl when they shocked Alabama. When I saw the score of that game, I was like, what? How did Michigan beat Alabama last year? But they did. And this is something that they are certainly going to look to do again, is go and beat an SEC opponent. It's going to be interesting. Oklahoma's going to need this win badly, especially if they want to compete in the SEC, if they want to have a successful season. If Brent Venables wants to keep his job, frankly, he's got to win this game against Michigan. Michigan, then, on the other side of it, they get a shot at going on the road, beating a big-time SEC opponent. They have a chance to spoil the 50th anniversary of Oklahoma's national championship team then that year, which actually, incidentally, was the last time that Michigan and Oklahoma met on the football field, was 50 years ago then. You can spoil that celebration if you're the Wolverines. This is a talented Michigan team that I think is going to bounce back. They're going to carry that confidence from the end of last season into this year. Quarterback's going to be interesting. Will it be Bryce Underwood? Will it be Mikey Keene? Not really sure. But Michigan going into Oklahoma, going to be a good one. I think that's going to be a matchup that could determine the way that both of those programs' seasons go. If Michigan gets the win, they have some confidence going into Big Ten play where they can probably pull out a couple more wins than maybe they're projected right now. Oklahoma gets the win. That kind of gives them a buffer going into SEC play and maybe they lose a game in SEC, but this Michigan game counts back up for that. Certainly very possible. Another kind of rivalry I think is going to be interesting is Florida-Miami. Now, Florida-Miami is going to be September 20th. Last time we saw them, Miami clobbered Florida on the road, 41-17 in Gainesville in the Swamp last year. But then Florida really finished the season a lot stronger. DJ Lagway's coming back. This should be a really talented offense. You have Jake Slaughter kind of anchoring that offensive line. Then Miami also getting Carson Beck in at quarterback. He went 2-0 against Florida when he suited up for Georgia, which is an interesting little side note there. But Florida's going to want this comeback. They got embarrassed, frankly, last season at home. This is certainly a winnable matchup for the Gators, too. They're a much more talented program than people give them credit for. Their losses last season were all pretty much against top 25 opponents. And they have a guy at quarterback in DJ Lagway who's getting some dark horse Heisman potential kind of vibes. Going to be a good one. I think Florida is going to make this much closer. I honestly think Florida probably wins this matchup here, but it's not going to be 41-17. It's going to be much tighter than it was last year, a game that we're really going to have to keep an eye on. And then another rivalry game that I just want to touch on for a second. There's actually two Clemson games. So Clemson, South Carolina, last week of the season, rivalry week. South Carolina won that in an upset last year in the Palmetto Bowl. Clemson's going to want that back. Clemson is really talented this year, one of the best teams in the country in terms of returning production, third-year starter at quarterback in Cade Klubnik. And then they also have a really intriguing opener against LSU. So you start against LSU, you finish with South Carolina. Those are two big-time matchups against SEC programs that I think are really going to kind of determine how Clemson's season will go. If they beat LSU, I think they carry that throughout the regular season, maybe potentially into the South Carolina game. But if they falter week one, LSU wins. I think it gives them a little shakier prospects for the season. Those two matchups, though, are going to be huge. I think that Clemson is going to be really interesting. The Palmetto Bowl, especially after kind of what happened last year with Lenore Sellers running for 150 yards. They're going to want to shut that down. They're going to want to get that back. Clemson's going to have a couple of really big-time matchups this year that you're going to want to tune into and watch on your television at home. So right now, we're going to take another short break. When we come back, we're going to switch gears. We're going to talk some quarterbacks. But we're going to dive into all of that when we come back on the GSMC College Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network on this Thursday, May 22nd. Just talked about some can't-miss matchups for this upcoming year. Going to switch gears. We're going to talk a little bit about quarterbacks right now and who really desperately needs a quarterback in the 2026 recruiting class, who needs to land one. We're going to talk about some programs that I think really do. And if you look at it right now, 14 of the 18 passers ranked inside ESPN's top 300 for 2026 are already committed. So that leaves only 4 really on the board. Ryder Lyons, number 5 pocket passer in the country, number 50 overall. Landon Duckworth, number 105 in the country, number 1 dual threat quarterback. Oscar Rios and Bo Bentley lower down the list at 193 overall and at 262 overall, respectively. So 4 quarterbacks right now. But despite that scarcity, there's a bunch of programs that really, really need a quarterback for this class. Starting with Florida State. So Mike Norvell, this is his 6th full recruiting cycle with the Seminoles. Still kind of waiting for that quarterback pipeline to take off. The January decommitment of Brady Smigel, who was number 45 in those rankings, committed then to Michigan. That was a big-time blow to the program's future prospects, future plans at the position. 4 months later, their efforts kind of hinge on landing 2 targets, Landon Duckworth and then Oklahoma commit Jaden O'Neal, who could kind of be on the fence of decommitting, it sounds like. Look at Landon Duckworth. This kid is dynamic, a playmaker that accounted for 51 total touchdowns as a junior last year. Kind of the precise fit of the mold of a dual-threat quarterback that Gus Malzahn really has kind of traditionally relied on throughout his years. You look at Cam Newton with the most success, but then other guys, Nick Marshall too at Auburn, Mackenzie Milton at UCF, just different guys like that were dual-threat, dual-purpose quarterbacks. Landon Duckworth is that guy. He's 6'3", 195, from Jackson, Alabama, but he knows kind of the history of Mike Norvell's high-producing offensive stats, offensive teams, and was previously recruited by Gus Malzahn at UCF too, so does kind of have a relationship there with Gus Malzahn, the new offensive coordinator. They're going to get a chance to kind of woo him when he takes his official visit to Florida State on June 13th. You look at Jaden O'Neal then too. This is a kid that's been committed to Oklahoma since June of 2024, so it's been a while. But following a coordinator change, Oklahoma bringing in Ben Arbuckle from Washington State, and they're also pursuing a second quarterback in the 2026 class. He's kind of a prime flip candidate at this point. Took unofficials to Florida State and Auburn this spring. Also has entertained interest from Georgia. But Florida State really needs to land one of these 2 guys. They've gotten just 10 combined starts from the 4 high school quarterbacks that they signed across 5 classes from 2020 to 2024. 10 starts from 4 quarterbacks. That's a really bad miss rate. Only one of those guys, too, is still in the program, Brock Len, redshirt sophomore. So can they finally get it right? Can Mike Norvell finally land one of these guys and get his quarterback of the future? This has been a position that's really been tumultuous for Mike Norvell, especially after Jordan Travis, that 2023 season. They haven't really had an answer since then. They need to get one of these guys. It's going to be interesting. LSU, I think they're kind of a low-profile team that needs a quarterback, but if you look at it, they didn't sign a quarterback in the 25 class. They had Bryce Underwood committed forever until he flipped to Michigan last November, kind of stunningly. They did add Michael Van Buren from Mississippi State. I think that's key to note here. A kid that's a redshirt freshman, has multiple years to start after Garrett Nussmeier leaves this upcoming year, but he's really the only kind of guy there. It's really thin besides those 2. Brian Kelly and his staff have worked really, really hard to try to secure a 2026 quarterback. They've circled back with Dia Bell, who's currently committed to Texas, as well as Keyshawn Henderson, currently committed to Houston, and Arizona State pledge Jake Fetty earlier this year. None of those guys kind of really said, yeah, maybe. They all kind of shut that down. They're also really heavily involved in the recruitment of Jonas Williams, who ended up flipping from Oregon to USC, so that kind of shut that down. And so they've now turned their attention to Bo Bentley, the 4-star, 262 overall prospect in ESPN's top 300. This is a kid that's one of the cycle's top risers. Led Salina High School in Texas to a 16-0 finish, 4A state title last year as their starter. A guy that's got more than a dozen Power 4 offers, but he's trimmed his list to Georgia, LSU, Oklahoma. So obviously Jared Curtis, now committed to Georgia, number 1 quarterback in the country. That kind of takes Georgia off the board, at least in my eyes. I highly doubt Bo Bentley would want to go try to compete with the number 1 guy in the country, try to get in at Georgia there. So now it's pretty much down to LSU, Oklahoma. Mind you, Oklahoma, they still have Jaden O'Neal. Could that be a factor here? It's kind of a critical stretch at this point for Bo Bentley, though. He's going to LSU next week, May 30th, and then he's going to Oklahoma on June 6th, the week after. So back-to-back weekends, trying to close down that recruitment. This is going to be an interesting decision. This is LSU's best chance, though, by far, to get a quarterback in this cycle. They really need to hit on Bo Bentley, and it's going to be interesting to see if he does end up picking the Tigers. Like LSU, then, Ole Miss is another program I think is really kind of interesting. They need some more depth this year. Didn't have a 2025 quarterback signee. That wasn't for lack of trying. They were really, really trying hard to flip Deuce Knight, an in-state prospect, at the end of the cycle, ended up going to Auburn. So they missed out on one really coveted dual-threat passer. Will this be the year that Lane Kiffin tries to go get another? Landon Duckworth is right now, sounds like that's Ole Miss's top target, and it sounds like Ole Miss might be tops on Landon Duckworth's list as well right now. They've sold him really heavily on the scheme fit in that kind of weird offensive scheme that Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weiss Jr. run, and also on the development of Jackson Dart, another kind of mobile dual-threat quarterback who ended up going in the first round this year. So he's still going to visit Auburn, South Carolina, Florida State, Ole Miss, but it seems like there's a solid lead right now for Lane Kiffin for the Rebels. This is Austin Simmons' job, right? He's going to take over starting duties this year, has 3 years of eligibility left, and there is some solid depth behind Austin Simmons right now. You have A.J. Maddox, former ESPN 300 quarterback, Oklahoma State transfer. I can't even pronounce his first name. I'm not even going to try. And then they also brought in Ferris State quarterback Trinidad Chambliss, who had 50 total touchdowns last year as a dual-threat quarterback. Kind of an intriguing guy. But none of those guys are proven. This is a big-time prospect that Ole Miss could pick up and solidify that position for the next few seasons after Austin Simmons as well. It would be their highest quarterback signing too since Matt Corral in 2018. So it's been a while for Ole Miss. They really kind of need to land a big-time quarterback, and it sounds like that might be Landon Duckworth. Another team I'm looking at right now is North Carolina. North Carolina, obviously, no team's getting more attention right now in 2025. And quarterback recruiting's kind of been a subplot in this season. Zay Lott flipped to Syracuse in March. They don't really have a quarterback right now. They've already missed on a pair of big swings. They try to go for Jared Curtis. They try to go for Brady Smeagol. Missed them both. Landon Duckworth, kind of still a realistic option for them, who still could schedule an official visit. He just doesn't have one at this time. They brought in Gio Lopez this year to be their starter, potentially their starter in 26 as well. But this is a program that, besides Gio Lopez, really does not have a ton of depth at quarterback. They desperately need to get that kind of guy of the future, and they really need a 26 quarterback. Ryan Brown transferred into North Carolina from Purdue, transferred back out to Purdue this transfer portal window. So they're going to need to get somebody. Not really sure who or what, but it's also important to note that they have money to spend right now. When North Carolina hired Bill Belichick, they gave him $13 million of access to revenue-sharing funds. So there's money to spend on a quarterback here. It's interesting. Could this be more of a long-term play for North Carolina? It's certainly very possible. Some of the key question marks, though. What happens if Jaden O'Neal does decommit from Oklahoma? He's immediately going to be one of the top quarterbacks in the country available. Auburn, Florida State, they're going to be primed to pounce on his availability at that time. Another question, can anybody flip Keyshawn Henderson? This is a guy that is been committed to Houston, is from Houston. Houston really wants to develop him as a quarterback, it kind of seems, as other programs are kind of looking at him as more of an athlete. But the door's still open here for a potential flip. Houston, obviously, they're not going to generate a lot of big-name interest. This is a guy that they've kind of kept at home so far, but bigger programs are going to come knocking on Keyshawn Henderson's door. It's just a matter of, will he actually stay loyal? Will he kind of keep his ears open to some of those outside calls? It's going to be interesting, though. But the 26th class, it really seems like there's a lot of high-end quarterbacks. Some programs, though, desperately need to get one. Florida State, I think they're going to be in really rough shape if they don't get a quarterback. But it's going to be interesting to see how this cycle kind of shakes out, what's going to happen, and what we're going to see where these guys end up at in the long term in 2026 and beyond. But right now, we're going to take our last break of the show. When we come back, we're finishing off the SEC rankings. We're going to do the top 3 teams today. I promise it's the end of the SEC rankings, but we're going to dive into that when we come back on the GSMC College Football Podcast. Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network on this Thursday, May 22nd. Going to finish off the show by finishing my SEC rankings today. We got teams 1 through 3. Obviously, we're going to start at 3 and work our way to the top. I have the Alabama Crimson Tide at 3. Now, I can understand the calls for a team like LSU to be at 3. LSU, obviously, I talked about them yesterday, brought in a ton of guys in the portal, have Garrett Nussmeier coming back, have a lot of really intriguing guys on that roster right now. But I'm going to bet on Alabama, on Coach Kalen DeBoer, figuring it out in year 2. There was a bunch of hand-wringing in Tuscaloosa after a 9-year season. Oh my goodness, 9 wins in a season. Oh no. Yes, obviously, that's the expectation at Alabama. That's the standard, though. Nick Saban said it. Any win total below 10 wins, below double digits, is just not acceptable. It's cause for concern in Tuscaloosa. But one kind of reset year, which, again, was still a really solid season by most standards, that doesn't detract from the fact that Kalen DeBoer is one of the best head coaches in the sport of college football. A guy that has been a winner everywhere he's gone, took Washington to the national championship. This guy can coach, he knows how to win, and he came into probably the toughest coaching job in America, having to replace arguably the greatest college football coach of all time at a program where expectations have been sky high for 20 seasons. Yeah, it's going to be a lot on Kalen DeBoer's shoulders. But even then, they still win 9 games last year. Yes, they're going to have to settle on a starting quarterback. It sounds like it's going to be Ty Simpson from everything that I've seen. But I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. Jalen Milroe, obviously, was super exciting at times, but was super disappointing at times. Was a guy that you never knew what you were going to get from Jalen Milroe. I think Ty Simpson at least gives Alabama a steadier hand, which I think that's honestly all they need. When you look at the weapons across the board here, Ryan Williams coming back for a sophomore season after a true freshman year in which he kind of let the college football world on fire, especially in the first month, especially against Georgia. This is a guy that has all the talent in the world. Jeremy Bernard coming back in the wide receiver room as well. You still have Jam Miller at running back. He's going to take over as the lead back. On defense, you have Damani Jackson coming back. You have Keon Sapp coming back in the secondary. Jackson at corner, Sapp at safety. Two guys that are going to solidify spots back there. You have Deontay Lawson, Justin Jefferson coming back to anchor that linebacker core. You have Tim Keenan, LT Overton on the defensive line. These were all really great contributors for Alabama for 2024 and should be even better in 2025. You look on offense. Caden Proctor, Jaden Roberts, Parker Brailsford, all returning on the offensive line. That's going to be a really, really great unit. This team, this program, still has all the talent in the world. They still have however many blue chips across the roster, right? Another guy that's could potentially make an impact, Jalen Mbakwe, guy that was the number one athlete in the country that's kind of gone back and forth between cornerback and wide receiver. That's a guy that can make a big-time impact on either side of the ball. A name to watch out for there for Alabama. I just think this team is too good, too well coached, to kind of have another season. They still won 9 games, and that was kind of a, oh my goodness, 9 wins only? They're going to be okay. They're going to figure it out. Kellen DeBoer's going to settle in as year 2. He gets his offensive coordinator back in Ryan Grubb after he was the OC of the Seahawks in the NFL for last season. He comes back to work with Kellen DeBoer. They're going to get back on track. I think this is a team that's, again, right in competition for a college football playoff berth, for potentially an SEC championship. Then I think Georgia's too. Georgia, yes, it's going to make a lot of sense. Reigning conference champions. There's a couple questions around them, though. Obviously, Carson Beck's gone. That's the big storyline here. You have to replace Carson Beck. Gunnar Stockton's going to come in. And he kind of performed up and down in the 2 games that he played. Played much better against Texas in the SEC championship than he did in his start against Notre Dame in the national semifinal. But you got to cut the kid some slack. I mean, his first start for Georgia was against Notre Dame in the national semifinal. That's insane. That's a huge stage. That's a lot to ask out of anybody, especially a guy that's been a backup all season. There were flashes of promise, though, during his time there. During his time under center in those 2 games. There were times where he showed that there's more to Gunnar Stockton than just this kind of up-and-down quarterback. You still have Nate Frazier coming back at running back. That's going to give them some continuity. The big thing here, wide receiver. What's going to happen at wide receiver? They're going to have to figure out who can actually catch the ball. Noah Thomas coming in from Texas A&M. Zachariah Branch coming in from USC. Those 2 guys should really help in that department. But this is a unit that struggled way too much with drops that just didn't help the Georgia quarterbacks out at all, really, last season. They're going to have to be better. But bringing in some of those guys, I think, helps them out a lot. You have Ernest Green returning at offensive tackle, two-time starter. You have Christian Miller coming back onto the defensive line. C.J. Allen returning at linebacker after finishing with 76 tackles last year, 12 tackles for loss, 5 pass breakups, 1 interception. So it gives you a little bit of pass coverage skills as well. You have Dalen Everett coming back. Coach's 3rd-team All-SEC selection last season, who started in 14 games at cornerback. Going to solidify one of those spots. KJ Bolden is back in the secondary. And they add Elo Mendozier, a really high-impact edge rusher, too, coming in from Army. A guy that's got super high potential if he can kind of work out some of the kinks and develop a little more, just get a little more technically sound and proficient. That's a guy that has really crazy high upside. Georgia, they're still going to be there. They're still going to be around. They're not going anywhere. They're going to be right at the top. But I think you got to give number 1 to Texas right now. Yes, Texas did lose 12 kind of impact players to the draft, including 3 first-rounders. But they deserve to be at the top of the rankings. That's kind of a testament to what Sarkisian has built there in Austin. Obviously, all eyes on Arch Manning. replacing Quinn Ewers after his tenure as the Texas starter, a guy that I don't know if I've ever seen a quarterback with this much hype coming into this season. After really not having ever been a full-time starter, this is a guy that's projected as a number 1 overall draft pick without ever really starting a college football game. That's the expectation. Will he meet those expectations? There's a ton riding on this kid's shoulders. The last name, the pedigree, just being at Texas too, being in the SEC. There's so many factors here to kind of the noise around Arch Manning. But we're going to see if he can play. And I think we've seen in the short glimpses of his play last season and the starts that he had in replacing the injured Quinn Ewers, this is a guy that can play. I think we're going to see it this year. But when you look at just across the board, you have Ryan Wingo coming back at wide receiver after a really great season last year. You have Emmett Mosley V coming in from Stanford after a great freshman season there. You have C.J. Baxter returning. You have Trey Wisner returning at running back. You have a really solid O-line. Then on defense, this is going to be one of the nation's best defenses. Headliner, Anthony Hill Jr. Remember the name, absolute freak, a kid that I'm super high on. He can do everything on the defensive side of the ball. He can rush the passer, stop the run, drop back into coverage. Just smart, instinctive, one of the best linebackers in the country, absolute stud, a guy that's going to anchor that defense. You have Colin Simmons on the D-line as an edge rusher, a high-impact edge rusher. Michael Ta'afe returning, kind of roaming in the secondary as at safety. Malik Muhammad as cornerback, hoping to kind of replicate what Jahdae Barron did there at Texas last year. This is a deep, talented, well-coached Texas team. They deserve to be number 1 right now. They don't have as many question marks as other SEC programs at this time. And I just think their potential as a potential national champion, I think it's higher than some of these other programs in Georgia and Alabama. Texas, you're the king of the SEC this year. So with that, we are going to end our show for today. Thank you so much for tuning in to the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Please remember to subscribe, like, follow the channel, and if you want, you can also go to Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter for even more sports content, more sports updates that you love. Thank you so much, and have a great day.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to